Check. Yes, good morning everyone. Yeah, I hope you had a wonderful morning. So we are beginning our workshop, and I'd like to welcome everyone, those who are here physically, and them who are attending virtually via Zoom and also on YouTube. So as we start, some housekeeping rules, especially to the Zoom attendees, is that please mute your mic, and if you have something to ask, you can drop on a chat, and if you want to ask out, either through your mic, you can always raise your hand and we'll be able to see you. Otherwise, you are all welcome, so that we learn together in this research workshop. Sorry we are behind in time, but we'll manage to cover everything. So straight to the program, I'd like to welcome the principal, College of Engineering and Technology, who is also the scientific director for the SEED project, to give the welcoming remarks. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Koesh. Our main guest, Professor Dise, from the Technical University of Munich, other invited guests, distinguished guests, and all protocols observed. Good morning. Mine is very simple. It's just to give a few remarks, a highlight about SEED project, and then further details on the activities of SEED project. You see them presented later by one of the SEED research assistants, two of them actually. But basically, I think my activities are one, just to say that SEED project, SEED means sustainable energy and entrepreneurship development for the global south. And this is a project that is funded by DAAD, and it's a 5-year project that started in 2019. Then, of course, it was largely affected by COVID-19. We were supposed to have a kickoff meeting in March 2019, but then the lockdown happened and quite a number of activities were affected. But it's a major project. It has postgraduate training, PhDs. It has also master's training. Actually, PhD training is what took off fast because of the fact that PhD, quite a good number of universities will not involve coursework. And therefore, we had 9 students that were admitted. And we have one of the students here called Pablo, who is also going to, who is a student of Professor Dise. He has been around, and then master's training, we are expecting them to start this year or maybe sometime next year, and there are quite a number of master's opportunities that are available. So we are lucky to have Professor Dise. Thank you, Professor Dise, for choosing JKUAT as one of the living labs that you are visiting. Professor Dise is an expert, is a civil engineer. He is also chair of the area of hydrology. He'll give us more details. And he is from the School of Engineering and Design. So the structure is almost similar for TUM with JKUAT, where we have schools and departments. But mainly to say that SEED is a multidisciplinary project. It has people from social sciences. So we have a professor again who is visiting next week, Professor Frank Bells, who is actually the main coordinator of the SEED project. So he's in the area of sustainable marketing. So mainly his focus will be in the school of, or in the College of Human Resource. So we are also organizing some other seminars with students and staff within the College of Human Resource Development. So mainly SEED, as we shall see, beside training, we have a component that involves an impact on communities. And we are also lucky to have a living lab, which is based at Narok. And the professor tomorrow will be traveling to the living lab. And what is interesting is to note that our Professor Gadenya here, has also been having some projects and some work going on in Narok. And very interesting to note that they are basically in the same area. Floods management, droughts, of course, these ones now are becoming very common, and they are aspects of climate change. So in order to sustain ourselves, how do we control them? So we are happy to have the link and the collaboration that Professor Gavenya and Professor Dise have organized. Professor Dise is a civil engineer, but his focus is water engineering. So then, of course, there's the overlap between what happens with our colleagues at a School of Biosystems Engineering and what happens with civil engineering. So you are at home when you are at SEED, because SEED recognizes the multidisciplinary nature. You can see Professor is in civil engineering. There's a lot of water engineering going on. There are social scientists like Professor Frank. You have electrical, mechanical engineers also involved. So we are happy to have this multidisciplinary nature. Just a brief about JKUAT. JKUAT has about 40,000 students, both undergraduate and postgraduate. The College of Engineering is the oldest. It has about 5,000 students distributed across 5 schools. So the only difference between TUM and JKUAT is above schools are colleges, but the number of colleges are 5. So we have a College of Health Science, College of Pure and Applied Science, we have the College of Human Resource Development, we have the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources, and I think they have the 5 that I've mentioned, yeah? And the College of Engineering, of course. So the college have over 300 members of staff, academic staff, and of course over 200 members of technical staff. So we are happy to have you around. Our Vice Chancellor is Professor Mabel, not Mabel, Professor Victoria Gumi, sorry for that, and she is assisted by 3 Deputy Vice Chancellors. One of the Vice Chancellors is Professor Bernard Ikua, who is also an advisor in the SEED project. And the last kick-off meeting we had in Germany, he was part of the team. So, Prof, just a brief introduction of members of JKUAT who are around here. I think we have members from the Department of Department of Agriculture Engineering. Do we have them? Led by the chair. Yeah, chair is here. Agriculture Biosystems Engineering. This is Dr. Rono, and I believe you have interacted with him. And also Madam Cecilia, and the others are online. Then we have Department of Soil and Water Engineering. Are they here with us, or they are online? We have Prof. Prof is here. Prof, we acknowledge your presence. Prof and the Dean, Professor Gavenya, the Dean, Dr. Sang, Joseph Sang, and Caroline is here. Then we have members from Mechanical Engineering Department. Dr. Howie is here with us. He is also part of the SEED team. We have the SEED project members. All of us just stand. Yeah, the team is led by myself. We also have Professor Ikua. We have Professor Moturi from the College of Human Resource. We also have Dr. Roy from Electrical Department. We have Dr. Harvey, But the core team, the secretariat is made up of Mr. Koesh, and he is here. You have interacted with him. There's also Susan, an electrical engineer. Koesh is a mechanical engineer. And from the social sciences, we have Cynthia Wainaina. So that makes up the team, the seed team. Then we have members who are also with us. We have, of course, communications, corporate communications office. Mr. Tobias, who is also part of that seed team. I did not see you stand, but you also have from the social media, is it? The group from social media, that is Keegan and Steve. Thank you. Then our colleagues behind there. These are our master students, the two of you, and Madam Pausti. So you are all welcome. The others who are also online, I saw Michelle is online. I don't know whether Johannes is online. From the two, mainly the secretariat team, the coordinating team in the Technical University of Munich. I saw a number of other colleagues from civil engineering. I think the chair of civil engineering is attending online with his team. So thank you so much, and you are welcome once again to Kenya and to JKUAT specifically. If you have time, have a chance of traveling around the country, and you'll see a lot of the resources we have, particularly for tourists, aside now from the core engineering areas that you have been dealing with. So thank you so much, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Principal, for the welcoming remarks. So we proceed in that manner, and the next is a presentation for the seed project, which is going to be done by my colleague Susan and Cynthia. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you are all okay. My name is Cynthia Wainaina. I'm the Assistant Local Coordination Officer in SEED Project. I work with my colleagues, Ms. Susan Kisengeu, who is also an Assistant Local Coordination Officer, and Mr. Dennis Koech, who is the Local Coordination Officer. I'll take you through the presentation about SEED Project. So the word SEED stands for Sustainable Energies Entrepreneurship and Development Center. Our main partner is the German government, who is our main funder through DAD at TUM. The project was initiated in January 2020. It runs for a span of 5 years, and it probably will end in December 2024. Our main project aims is the creation of living labs for research and teaching, as well as offering interdisciplinary doctoral and master programs related to renewable energy and entrepreneurship. So our vision for the Living Lab is to provide a multidisciplinary learning opportunities to scholars and researchers in clean and renewable energy, to promote economic development in marginalized communities through energy provision, to enable communities to be connected to off-grid systems, and also to be active contributors of Kenya Vision 2030. Our mission as a Living Lab is to work together with communities to access clean energy for economic developments, Since we are working with the marginalized communities, which does not have access to vital social amenities like electricity, we saw that it was fitting to collaborate with them to identify and come up with solutions that are within the locality of their area that will help them develop themselves economically. Our other mission is to liaise with researchers and experts in the field of renewable energy in coming up with alternative solutions for green energy. This means that we are working with stakeholders in the renewable energy industry so that we can see alternative solutions for green energy in order to reduce CO2 emissions that are generated from fossil fuels. The other mission is to foster and encourage a culture of learning and research in renewable energy among the students, and also to empower communities with skills and solutions to promote entrepreneurship and economic development. How we plan to do this is through numerous capacity building activities to equip them with skills that will enable them to increase sources of income for their livelihoods and also for the community. Susan?
Thank you. My name is Susan. I'll continue where Cynthia just left off in terms of what we've done for both the community and the researchers, because those are our two objectives. So in the community, we are building a 12 kilowatt peak solar mini grid. The community is located far off from the nearest Kenya Power grid, and so we will be powering the shopping center. So far, we have delivered a design approved by the Rural Electrification and Renewable Energy Corporation, who we are working with very closely. We also procured the hardware through the JKUAT procurement process and had it delivered on site. And we are in the process of winding up with the installation. We got our approvals from the NEMA, the National Environmental Management Authority, so that we do things according to the Kenyan laws. And lastly, as Cynthia has said about empowering the community, we've been able to form a cooperative society. That is, for the Kenyans, we know what SACCOs are. So the community is able to earn income, invest some money, and that will be the sole organization to manage the operation and maintenance of the solar grid. And for the researchers, such as Pablo here, we've been able to provide some data in terms of we take them to site, they're able to gather as much data as possible to do their research, and in return empower the community from their findings. We have provided scholarly linkages. For example, Mr. Tobias here, he'll be able to work with some of our partner universities such as Ghana to do his master's studies. And for industrial linkages, as mentioned, we are working with different government corporations. We are linking the scholars to the industry and providing experimental ground within the community. So currently, some of the ongoing activities include tariff approval. So this power will be provided as the grant given to us by DAD, but for operation and maintenance purposes, we need to collect some tariff, the way we pay our electricity bills. So the approval process is ongoing, with EPRA having gone to site early this year in February, and we're waiting for their license for us to power the community. We are also around 80% done with the installation of the solar mini grid as phase 1. Phase 2 will be the biogas, where we also have a PhD student doing research on biogas. And phase 3 is the irrigation system, which is the core purpose of this workshop. And lastly, we're in the process of getting our energy permits. And these are also some of the upcoming activities that we intend to do. We intend to have research networks created by members present, members online. We are welcoming you to join us in doing your postgraduate research. We are also in the process of launching some master's programs to do with entrepreneurship, with reference to renewable energy, because at the end of the day, the community must earn a living, it is not just a donation or a grant. We need this to be a sustainable project, just as our title said. We are doing capacity building, as my colleague had mentioned, connecting the community to electricity. Being an off-grid community, they don't have any source of power, and we are also looking forward to commissioning the mini-grid. My colleague will take you through what exactly we are asking for in your collaboration.
Thank you, Susan. So as a project, we want to call for collaboration from the student community and the university community. So we would like support on assessing groundwater assessment for viability in sustainable farming. We also need support in assessment of nutritional food crops to be grown in the area so that we can advise the farmers on the kind of crops they will grow. We also need support in evaluation of sustainable farming practices so that we can use water efficiently and the resources available efficiently. What we can offer as a project is financial facilitation for research. This is in terms of student mobility funds, where you can be supported to go to the field, collect data so that you can be able to proceed with your studies. Also, we can offer community linkages, since we already have an existing community that is very willing to work with us. We can also offer stakeholder linkages at the devolved government level. So we have a lot of networks within the Narok County government which can be useful to the researcher. We'll also offer scholarly linkages with JKUAT research community so that at least the students can be able to link up and collect valuable data. We can also offer global linkages with partner universities in the Seed Center network. We are a network of 8 universities. We can also offer geographical scope for model testing. So our expectations is to co-author publications on seed-related topics, where you will liaise with other students from other universities in the seed network to do your research and publish. We also expect knowledge transfer to community members, where the student will be able to once in a while train the farmers or focus group. We also expect assistance in building of seed center scholarly database. Thank you.
Thank you so much, seed team, for your presentation. Really appreciate. So that was about the seed project. So we also have our department from soil water engineering and also agriculture and power systems engineering. I would like to welcome them to give a presentation on the research activities so that we can see how we can collaborate in their department. We have an online presentation from Dr. Hosea Mwangi. Dr. Hosea, I hope you can hear us. Dr. Hosea? Yes, Dr. Hosea, you can proceed if you are okay.
Yeah, I can confirm now that maybe the voice has been projected and you can hear me from there.
Please proceed.
You can just let me know whether you're okay, then I can just share my screen and then maybe for the online audience.
Yes, you can proceed.
Thank you very much. other soil and water engineering, and also sanitation. So the departments, overview, we have 4 full professors. We have 1 associate professor. We have 1 senior lecturer. We have 2 lecturers, 2 assistant lecturers, statutory fellows, and then we have 5 teaching assistants, and we also have the technologies. The areas of expertise in the department, we have hydrology. It's a big area. We have many people, of course, led by Professor Gadenya, who are in hydrology, including myself, the dean, and many more. We also have irrigation engineering and management. You have many of them. I don't know whether Professor Ome has joined, and also Professor Meso. We have wastewater engineering and sanitation. We have sustainable land management. We have environmental engineering. We are also good in climate change, soil erosion, and also the issue of sediments, especially in the reservoirs. Also in GIS and processing and aquaculture engineering. So now I want to talk about research activities. As I said, some of them selected. There are many more. I want to talk about this one, which we just completed just a few months ago, about mapping water resources in community conservancies, and also developing a water management strategy. And this work was based in Isiolo and Samburu counties. And you can see there, because these are some of the most dry counties that we have in Kenya. They are in northern Kenya, and there is a big challenge, especially when it comes to water issues. And what we are doing is that we are mapping the water resources, all of them, and also trying to come up with water management strategies that can also be used in the community conservancies. Because see, the management of water resources in those communities is different, like what we have here. But you realize maybe also in Narok, maybe some parts of Narok is the same, because Narok is also a semi-arid county in Kenya. So we developed that, and it's almost ending that project now. Then we also have, and this one issue, the issue of aquatic providing system, especially in the lakes. And what you can see here is some bathymetric surveys that have been done, especially this project is led by one of our members of staff, Dr. Sam, who is also our dean. And we have these boats, and he has done a lot of research. And these are some of the outputs of the research. There is more, especially in some lakes. We have done Lake Naivasha, whether it's Lake Naivasha, there is also the Sasumwa Dam, Nick's just done the other day. We have the Kaili Dam and many other, including Lake Nakuru. So so we have the capacity, and the equipment is at the department. It's available for use in research. And there is this project which is led by Professor Gadenya, and I think I know Pablo met Professor Gadenya. Professor Gadenya is attending physically, and also I was told Professor This also met Professor Gadenya in Narok about the flash floods in Narok, and there are lots of outputs from that project, and there are more. It's just some overview of some of them, because some work has been done on the catchment, others has been done at the town which floods. And I think we have a PhD student who is doing flood hazard mapping, Dennis, and we also have other PhD students, some from Pan-African University, PAU, and we also have many other master students who are still continuing the project. And I believe this one, maybe Professor Dise and Professor Gadenya maybe they had more discussion, because we hear it's narrow, the same county where you have the SEED project. So yeah, that's good. Then we also have this project that is starting. We are starting with our partners in Dresden, where I studied, and it was funded by DFG, just I think towards the end of last year, already this year. And what we'll be doing is that we'll be trying to link soil erosion dynamics with the identification of the source areas. And also, we'll also go to the catchments, to the dam, and do some sediment co-analysis so that we can link the source of the sediment from where it came from. This work is built with some work that we have already done because we have been continuing. There was a PhD student who is almost done, and we had done some preliminary work, including mapping of soils in that area. This is one of the publications. There is another one, and so it will just build on what we had started as a collaboration. In this project, also Dr. Sang is also in, with the dean, will be still there, right? So we are still in the very early stages of this project, so maybe not more of other outputs, but we believe it's a 3-year project, maybe more will come later on. And then this is this project, which is led by Professor Mati, and which is supporting transformative adaptation and building ecological resilience to drought for sustainable development. Professor Mati is one of the food professors in our department, and this project will be done is being done, is currently being funded from the UK in the Upper Ewasonyiro Basin. That is also in northern Kenya. And as you can see, it's just started. That is where you have the Ewasonyiro. You can see the counties. We have the Linkages, we have the Isiolo, we have, and also Samburu counties. And you can see some of the photos there. So maybe we don't have some outputs as of now. The project started and it's still continuing. I had talked about one of the programs that we are having at the department is MSc Sanitation, and this program, we devolved it. It was initially in IHE depth, and this project was led by Professor Meso, and what we wanted is that to get the program and then we customized it to our requirements at the university. So it's a new program now that we have started. Now it's in sanitation. So because as I said, we had environmental engineering and management, but now we also got another one, which is sanitation. So that's for those, because we realize there's a gap, especially in SDG number 6. So we'd want to do not only this, and there is more into that which we can discuss later because of time. I have 2 other projects here. One of these projects is by some of our students who are staff, like for example this one, which is evaluation of irrigation water variability and seasonal variability, field water demands and use under climate change impacts in irrigation scheme. That's one of our irrigation schemes in Kenya. This is a project that's being done by one member of our staff called Daniel. He's studying in Japan now, and I think he's attending virtually. I saw him initially. So it's also a project that's related to us, but studying somewhere in Japan. He just started his PhD, I think, towards the end of last year. And then we also have another work that will be done by one of our staff, who is also a PhD student in Japan, to be evaluating the surface water and groundwater interaction by coupling hydrological models. We'll be using the JKUAT coupled with mod flow, but this study will be done in a catchment in Okayama, Japan. I'd like to thank you. That's the end of my presentation because I had 5 minutes. I don't want to exceed a lot. Thank you very much, and I think we can maybe even after the presentation have more interaction, especially because we have representation from the departments. So Professor Disse and the group that are there, Professor Galenia, the dean, Cecilia, who is studying for us. Maybe they can have more discussion. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Dr. Marcia, for that. So we hope for further engagement. Let me welcome Dr. Rono.
Thank you so much. Professor Disse from Technical University, our principal, College of Engineering and Technology, Dr. Engineer Deriti, Pablo Samento, also from UNIP, and professors here present and those joining online, other colleagues. Welcome to the presentation. I'm picking up from where my colleague, Dr. Mangi, has left. We are in the same School of Biosystems and Environmental Engineering, but personally I came from the Department of Agricultural and Biosystems Engineering. So the department, as I say, is one of the departments under the College of Engineering and Technology. Just because of time, I'll highlight some few programs offered at the department. We have the BSc Agricultural and Systems Engineering, and that's a 5-year course, and then a 4-year course, BSc Energy and Environmental Technology, and then MSc PhD programs in the same line. We are in the process of launching the BSc Chemical Engineering. We have 15 academic staff members, professors all the way to the tutorial fellows, and then 4 technologists, and then to support staff. So the facilities present at the department, we are in a position to do some training, research, and other consultancies. So because of time, I think I selected projects, research projects, which our team is involved in. Mainly the themes of food, processing, energy, mechanization, and related. But what being a very critical resource also touches on what we do in one way or the other. Seed, I think the coordinators mentioned something about the energies in what is very key in what they do in the projects. So we have some projects which we are engaged in at the moment on renewable energy. First one being the hybrid energy system, solar biomass. So basically making use of these energy sources for food processing. So you got the photo on the right, there's the solar biomass dry, which is basically being used by farmers in Kenya. And also the same is another technology also utilizing this renewable energy, the carbon-based solar PV, to enhance the efficiency of these cooling systems. So it's also being adopted in one of the counties in Kenya, that's Kirinyaga County. And I mentioned something about the mechanization. So the department, the team of our department, working with other partners for this specific case, those through USA India. I've been working on this innovation, what we in Kenya call the Agile. It's basically a mini tractor for different farm operations. So technology is still going through more improvements based on the data collected during field testing. And also mechanization is attraction for this specific case. What you can see on the bottom right is I think mechanization being used by some farmers, as in Kericho County, and this is funded by World Bank. And so JKUAT is partnering with a number of institutions locally, and of course with the farmers. And more on energy, so also solar PV technology. One of the MSc students is finalizing on his work. Having done some work on the PV technology, so integrating these to enhance maybe existing systems, for example, cooling or drying systems. So it's foldable modules. This is a foldable kind of thin film technology for different fabrication processes. And then number 6 is this is I'm calling it agri-energy banana. It's it's integrated kind of project involving not just members of the College of Engineering, but also from agriculture, even animal science, basically to integrate or rather have a central kind of facility where a number of value addition processes for banana can be done. And then of course develop products which can be sold and definitely enhance sustainability of these farmers. So it's an ongoing project which is led by JKUAT but partnering with other institutions in Kenya. Greenhouse, personally I've been involved in the greenhouse structures. That's I did my PhD in Germany, having studied on heat transfer on greenhouse structures. So our students have been I've had keen interest on the different greenhouse types, the different designs, and specifically, for example, what is shown on the photo is such systems which can be favorable for urban farming. So design models have been developed, which have, I think, in a number of exhibitions, and shows, and even training. We've been using the same even to maybe engage students for different research projects. And another one on community waste management, basically. It's an ongoing project funded by JKUAT, involving maybe mapping of different wastes and how the different energy conversion systems. So here present in the room is also one of the project members, that's Dr. Awi, and we also have the principal, Dr. Anderitu. We were working on this with other colleges within JKUAT and our Institute of Energy and Environmental Technology and other local and international partners. So we hope to see how some of these technologies in energy conversion and mapping can be upscaled. And through our JKUAT, we have an industrial park. We have this biogas, what you're calling here Rehau, home gas. So our department has been hosting a demo site where guests or visitors would come and would want to know exactly what is happening in terms of the biogas technologies. So at least we have is an opportunity to have this kind of language with farmers and do some trainings on the same. And then maybe just a mention of working with other members of College of Agriculture and Natural Resources on maybe insects, exploring possibility of maybe insects for food or feed security. And for our department, they've been playing a key role in terms of the structures involved for adaptive rearing of these insects. Another project where we work with, funded by DAD and DLR, what we are calling Sustain AM. That's basically utilizing the bio-based materials with the bio-waste for additive manufacturing. So the partners, we have Technical University, Berg Academic Freiberg, and JKUAT. So our college is led by the School of Mechanical Manufacturing and Materials Engineering, is leading on this. So, and we intend to involve a number of students to participate in the different work packages of this project. Also, is something, another project which is starting on, this is fish, silver supreme, I believe, maybe during our free time we can check which type of fish is this, but basically also on processing technologies and developing products from this. So it's funded by EU, and JKUAT is working with our enterprise. We have a JKUAT enterprise, JKUAT-S, Kemfree, Kenya Marine Fisheries Research Institute, and then the beach management units in some selected counties. So just to mention, we've been challenged at the university not to have or do some of this work and leave them here. We have to disseminate and ensure that the farmers or stakeholders benefit from them. So our department has been working with some farmer groups to ensure that these technologies are commissioned and utilized. I know we can work on this. We have been working with a number of partners, global, not just regionally or locally, but internationally. So I believe maybe in due course we'll be having a working relationship with Peru. I can see Pablo there, so maybe we can build up on this. The impacts may not, because of time, I may not go through all this, but just to mention that they have documented evidence on socioeconomic development, capacity building of different stakeholders, and the dissemination of knowledge and technologies on what we do. Our contacts, so we welcome you guests to visit our department, our school, JKUAT at large. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, the Department of Seed and Abed from JKUAT for your presentation. So next we want to hear also the projects under the Chair of Hydrology, who is our guest, was also in attendance here with us, is his PhD student, so that he can make his presentation on the current projects under his chair. He will then go ahead to present something on drought management, modeling and forecasting. Then we do a short break. Then we do flood management. Then dealing with uncertainties in hydrological models. So it's my pleasure to welcome Professor Disi. Karibu sana.
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation, for having us here. Dear Principal, dear Professor Gatenia, dear colleagues, and I'm happy to be the first time in Kenya. I visited your very nice university yesterday. I arrived 2 days ago in the night, and you have a really beautiful campus with many colleges, and I have already visited your labs, and I spoke with different professors, and I see also very many contacts for research or collaborations in the future. We are splitting this presentation. I will give a short overview over my chair. The chair is called Hydrology and River Basin Management, and we talked yesterday with the principal already about water, and then water connects everything, and we are really an interdisciplinary chair. We are working together with mechanical engineering, but also with life sciences. We have a big school at TUM for life sciences. That could be also very interesting for you. But I will talk mainly about my chair now. These are my staff members, more or less. We made an excursion to the Bavarian mountains. It's a beautiful place. Munich is near to the mountains and to the lakes, and this is just one photo of our on one of the top of the Bavarian mountains. This is my address. So please have a look on all our projects and all the current projects and also the finished projects. We have no time to explore all our projects of the chair. And if you go to TUM here, you will also see the other schools. I'm belonging to the School of Engineering and Design, as you already mentioned, Department of Civil Engineering and Environmental Engineering, and the chair is Hydrology of River Basin and River Basin Management. These are my postdoc researchers. So my deputy is Professor Gabriele Chiogna. He has an adjunct professorship at the University of Innsbruck. He is more an expert in surface groundwater interaction. So he's more a groundwater modeler. Then we have Dr. Jingshui Huang. She's more river water modeling, especially for river quality, for water quality in rivers. Dr. Ye Tuo is a remote sensing expert and also an expert in machine learning or artificial intelligence. Dr. Alexander Gerner is more related to water management as a whole and peatland hydrology. And Dr. Karl Bruch is my postdoc for hydrodynamics. So we are also doing hydrodynamic modeling, not also hydrology modeling. I myself, I'm coming more from flood management and flood modeling, but of course we extended our chair nowadays also for droughts, because floods and droughts is the same, or are the opposite sides of the same coin, I would say. Yeah, here a short overview about the ongoing projects. Perhaps I cannot go through all the projects. As I mentioned, we have the surface groundwater interaction and mixing. This is a DFG project. Perhaps interesting for you, maybe Aquasol. It just has started. You see the title, Improved Groundwater Formation and Water Quality Through Solar Parks. So there are many solar parks in Germany as well, PV parks. And of course, the hydrology, especially the soil hydrology, will change if you manage this big land use change from crops to solar parks. So we hypothesize that we have a bigger groundwater recharge, a larger groundwater recharge because of reduced evaporation, and the danger could be more surface runoff because the solar parks, the solar panels will concentrate the water, but with small depressions or small management in the parks, we try to retain the water in the parks to increase water recharge, and also biodiversity. So this has just started. This is more about karst groundwater. Earl is also an interesting project, just started. It's a close collaboration with the Agricultural Research Center of Bavaria, especially aiming at erosion prevention and infiltration enhancement. Climobi is about peatlands and climate change. Of course, seed. Pablo will talk more about seed. I will talk a little bit more about fury floods in the next slide, so I can skip it. This is more an ecologically based project with other ecologists from another university in Kyrgyzstan. It's just to quantify the ecosystem services of floodplain restoration in Kyrgyzstan. This is about the high alpine regions, retreat of glaciers due to climate change in the past and for the future. I will talk about Studio in my drought lecture, so we can skip this. This is an interesting drought management project. We have also a project in Jordan, Water D2D, that means from data to decision, so how to, let's say, educate the politics, the policy makers to use the data for smart decisions in water management. And Hydromet Senso is also a small project just to check if we can use sensors, cheap sensors in the catchment for better forecasting hydrological cycle and also floods. For Professor Cadenia, I introduced this slide that is just finished. It was a European project, but that was about flood restoration, or floodplain restoration along the Danube River. That is the second largest river in Europe. And we had many partners here. We calculated the effect of flood retention due to floodplain restoration. Our project here was more to assess the ecosystem services and biodiversity in that project, and to translate the ecosystem services to a cost-benefit analysis. So to an extended cost-benefit analysis for giving guidance for the policymakers that river restoration and floodplain restoration is worth to do, not only for flood attenuation, but also for biodiversity, groundwater recharge, and so on. There are many reports available, so if you have questions to that, we can go further later on. Fury flood is also a project that just has started half a year ago. Fabian Merck is my PhD student for that. It's not in East Africa, it's in West Africa, so the other side to going to the west. Of course, you all know that we have big problems for floods, both rural floods and flash floods in cities. Here you see statistics and what will come up in the next years. So the losses in billions of dollars for Africa, the blue bar indicates here floods. And also climate change will have an impact, and the migration of people more to the cities, so that is the people living in urban areas, and this is in the rural areas, and you see that has been changed now totally, and in the coming decades much more people will live in cities than in the rural areas, and that is also a big problem for flooding, for city flooding, for flooding in cities because of the density of settlements. So the research objects of Fury Flood project is to have a catalog of past extreme precipitation events and assessment of future rainfall extremes. So we have partners from KIT, Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. They are doing these rainfall extremes. Then we assess current and future flood risks and delineation of risk indicators, together also with the UNU University in Bonn, United Nations University in Bonn. And the final goal is more or less to give a guidebook for ecosystem-based flood risk mitigation measures and web GIS-based platforms. So we want to go here also for nature-based solution for flood mitigation. Our task is twofold. We have to model the city of Kumasi for urban floods. And how can we do it? We will use the Telemark model. It's a hydrodynamic 2D model to exactly model the flood routes in the city of Kumasi. We have remote sensing. We will use remote sensing data, Terasa X Sentinel data, because we have not so many measurements in the city, so we have to use remote sensing data. And for the big catchment of the Ueme River in Benin, that is our second catchment, we will also use many remote sensing products. I don't want to go into detail here. We have to model the 48,000 square kilometers. That will be done with a SWOT model, but for estimating the inundation and the velocities and the inundation area and the water depth, we will use a 1D model, that is a HECRAS 1D model, and a 2D model for the more populated areas downstream of the Ueme River. That will be, again, the Telemark 2D model. Okay, I want to skip this slide because of time, but we have already modeled the SMOT model, the catchment and subcatchments. The accuracy is quite well, and we use all these data, and we will calibrate. We do a multi-calibration, not only with the discharge, but also with ET products given by remote sensing data. That is under investigation. So now I will hand over to Pablo for the SEED project.
Hello, good morning. My name is Pablo Sarmiento. I'm a PhD candidate in the Technical University of Munich in the chair of Hydrology and River Basin Management. Professor Marcos Dice is my supervisor. And I'm also part of the PhD program of the SEED Center, the Sustainable Energies and Entrepreneurship and Development. So I want to share with you my research project. It's titled Sustainable Groundwater Irrigation Management for the Implementation of Solar Pump Irrigation Systems in Rural Communities of East Africa. So there are two communities I'm working currently. It's Agroclimatic here in Kenya, and the second is the Dangeshta community in Ethiopia. So my project started in November 2020, and it will be up to November 2024. This project is funded by the EXIT program, which is a program from the DAD, and also is funded by the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development of Germany. So the institutions that are involved, as I said, the chair of Hydrology and River Basin Management, the SEED Center, and also we are collaborating together with the JKUAT University and also the Bahir Dar University in Ethiopia. So these institutions are already implemented a living lab in the rural communities in Alderkesi and Geshta, where we can conduct our research projects. So now I would like to talk about the framework of my research. One of the objectives of the SEED Center is to implement a water energy food nexus. And as you can see, this is a circular system where the energy comes from the sun and it's transformed in electricity through solar panels. And this electricity is intended to energize the households of the community and also to power the water pumps. So these water pumps will extract water from the ground for irrigation purposes. In that way, we can provide a sustained source of water for the community, not only so they can produce food not only during the rainy season, but also it's most focused during the dry season, so they can produce food the entire year. And the remains of this agricultural production can be used as an input for biogas as an alternative source of energy. So in that way, we are closing the circle, and this nexus is intended to be self-sustained. So my research will be focused in the water as a limiting resource to ensure the sustainability of these systems. I would like to assess how much water is sustainable possible to use without affecting or without impacting the ecosystems. And as I said, one of the communities I'm working is located in Olderkesi, in the Narok County. As you can see, this is the delineation of the basin. We have the Sun River, and the yellow circle is where the living lab is located. So it's very close to the border with Tanzania. And this Sun River basin is part of a bigger basin, which I'm sure you all know it from the Mara River basin. So the objective of my research, first of all, I'm developing a hydrological model with SWAT. The focus of this, or the objectives of this, is to estimate the groundwater recharge that happens in the basin where the living lab is located. And this recharge is intended to be used for the irrigation purposes. Why we are using the recharge of the water? Because in that way we can ensure not to overexploit the groundwater that is already present in the basin. And the next step will be estimating the irrigation potential of the living lab or of the community within the basin. Next, another objective will be more focused on the solar pump irrigation system per se. So I would like to improve the irrigation efficiency. You can see there's a layout of the irrigation system. We will use the solar panels to produce electricity that can energize or power the water pumps that will extract water from the ground, and it will pump the water to a water tower that is connected to the crops with dripping lines. And the next objective will be optimize the use of water by developing soil and water management strategies. This will be more focused on reduce the evaporation of the soil and also to maintain the soil moisture for a longer period. For example, just to maintain vegetative cover to the soil, not to have like a bare soil. The methodology, that's also what we are going to do tomorrow, that we are going to the living lab. We will take soil and water samples, and we further will be analyze them and focus on the quality for agricultural purposes. Then, as I said, I will use the SWAT model that Dr. Jose already mentioned, that you have a current project with QSWAT and MedFlow. So SWAT is basically a semi-distributed hydrological model that estimates the water balance within a basin, and it divides the basin into subbasins, and these subbasins are also further divided in hydrological response units. And these HRUs are formed by the combination of the type of land use or land cover, the type of soils, and the topography or the slopes that we can find in the basin. And SWAT assigns parameters to these HRUs and simulates the hydrological response. And one of these hydrological response that I'm interested about, or the output, will be the groundwater recharge. And finally, the core of my research will be in the estimation of irrigation potential. This involves several formulas that I'm not going much into detail, but we will require the calculation for water available for irrigation, core water demand, irrigation efficiency, and also irrigated area. This is mainly focused to know up to how much extent we can have the cropland in the community without over-exploiting the groundwater and without affecting the ecosystem services that the groundwater provides. And to conclude, this will be more interested for the JKUAT students. I came up with some research opportunities or collaborations that maybe the students that are online are also interested. These are related to my project, but of course we are very open. If you have your own idea or your interest that can fit to the project, please feel free to contact me or Dennis. One of the research opportunities is the analysis and assessment of the agroclimatic conditions for implementing agricultural systems in the community of Olderkesi. So the task will be collecting agroclimatic data, analyze the data sets, propose a cropping system, can be intercropping, crop rotation, and also estimate the yield of these cropping systems, and implementing a rain gauge and a temperature. But now I find out that we already have a TAMO station in the Living Lab, so the last task, I think we can skip it. And the second research opportunity is it deals with the assessment of soil and water quality parameters for agricultural production in Olderkesi. So the task will be first establish a minimum data set of indicators to evaluate the soil and water quality for agricultural production. Do the sampling. This will be more like a field experiment or tasks. And lastly, evaluating and discuss the soil and water quality characteristics in Olderkesi for agricultural production. And if you are interested and also have new ideas that can fit my project, these are the contacts. This is my email, and also from Dennis. And yeah, that's it for me. But I also want to take a minute to thank you, Dennis, Susan, Cynthia, Dr. Endiritu, the staff of JKUAT, and also the professors and the staff that I have met. You have been very helpful with me, very supportive with my research. So thank you very much. Asante sana.
Thank you so much. So a lot of information is still coming, and we can reap a huge harvest from it. So in this moment, we are going to take a short break. We have some refreshments for 15 minutes. So we'll be back in 15 to 12 noon. For the online attendants, thank you for your participation. Please, you can also take a commercial break. We'll be back in 15 minutes. You can take a cup of water or something close to your coffee or something, and then we proceed together. From then, we are going to get sharing from Professor Marcus on drought management, flood management, and dealing with uncertainties in hydrological models. Please also remember to fill in our forms attendance list for the physical attendees and online attendees. For the online, the link is posted on the chat. Please fill the form. So we'll be back in 15 minutes time. Thank you. Asante. Yeah.
Kigen. Hizi bado zinapika. Hizi bado. Ninasikia kuniuliza au nilapi kuniuliza hizi kuletea
is never interesting. There is sickness there.
Acha nitoke hapa. Acha niweke nitoke.
bado inaonekana.
Ah, 3 minutes later. Nitaongeza. Mbele 3 minutes. Bado anda kurudi tata kama. Ongeza gai. Ongeza faida.
Nikifika before.
Si bado naongeza tu.
Na mimi nikifika watu kuja kwa
si una nini?
Watu.
Check. So welcome back again. We proceed with our research workshop. To our online audience, you're welcome. We proceed with the program. So I'll hand over the mic to Professor Dise to proceed from there. We'll start with flood management. Welcome, Prof. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Good, yes, so we start with the flood management part, and then we go for drought in the next presentation. I divided the flood management part into two parts. The first is about flash flood susceptibility maps for Bavaria. That work was mainly done by Maria Kaiser, a former PhD student of mine. She now left the university, is working for an enterprise, but that was mainly the topic of her dissertation. The background, also in Bavaria, recently we had very large, heavy rain-induced flood events, not river floods for a large catchment, more heavy rain-induced flood events for small catchments. And we lost about 1,485 million euros between 2002 and 2017, only in Bavaria. Bavaria is a size of 70,000 square kilometers. But all over the world, this threat of heavy rainfall is coming up, and it will increase in the future, all climate scientists say. What is a heavy rain-induced flood? So I think we have to distinguish between two types of heavy rain-induced floods. There's the typical flash flood, originates from the creek or river, so you have high intensities, high short duration intensities, infiltration capacity is not possible to infiltrate all the water, and so the water is coming into the river, and the capacity of the river is exceeded, and you have large floodings coming from the river. But there are also pluvial floods. That is the opposite. You have sealed areas in a town, and the water doesn't need a catchment, doesn't need a river. It's coming from the surfaces, white water from all surfaces, from hill slopes and so on, and pouring down into the river. So these are the two mechanisms, and normally both mechanisms are occurring together. So flash floods and pluvial floods mainly occur simultaneously, so we will use the term heavy rain-induced floods for summarizing both types of floods. The objective of this part of my presentation is to develop a data-driven approach to identify pluvial and flash flood susceptibility areas in the state of Bavaria. So this is a data-driven approach, not a modeling approach. The modeling approach will be given in the second part of my talk. So what do we need for a data-driven approach? Of course, we need data. So we have to generate a data set, and that must be done in a smart way and in a way you can refer to. That was a big issue of Maria's work. Data management, data storage, data analysis, And then you can learn artificial intelligence model for these kind of endangered areas. It's a susceptibility area, so it's not for granted, it's a statistical approach. But we did it beforehand to identify areas where flash floods are more common or more probable, and areas where you don't have to expect flash floods at all. And if we have identified these endangered areas, we will go for more sophisticated models, for hydrodynamic models, for instance. Yeah, so the dissertation was based on 3 papers. The first was, can you freely download here in the Journal of Hydrology, providing guidance on efficient flash flood documentation and implication-based approach. I don't want to go through all these details, but we have to define a target. What do we want to collect, for which purposes? We have to collect it in a meaningful way. The description must be homogeneous. We have to explore the data. We have to collect data from different sources. I will come to that in a minute. We have to prepare, and that's in a good database. We use the ArcGIS database, find connection between the data, and we have to validate the data at the end. So one product, how many data did we collect? That was a huge work. We collected nearly 24,000 number of events for whole Germany. So we extended our database for whole Germany, and for Bavaria it was 1,700. From the so we have some markers, some flood markers from even in the early medieval times, 346, one event, until nowadays. For Bavaria, the time series is not so long. We got it from insurance companies, scientific projects, of course, the European Severe Weather Database, Bavarian Environmental Agency, the archive of the Federal Agency for Technical Relief, so they are more the savers in case of a flood, and of course the German Weather Service. And here is just the counting of the number of events we have found. I thought this would be an animation, no. And you see flash floods can occur everywhere, and of course where our population is more dense, we have more documentation of the flash floods. So it's a little bias, but we are more interested in flash floods which has damages for people. Okay, hopefully you can see it. So these are the different kinds of collecting clusters. We collect, of course, catchment information, the administrative structure, the event description itself. Do we have measurements or not? Some meta information and so on. And this is really, if you go into detail, you cannot read it, and I cannot read it either. But of course, for instance, for the catchment information, we have the gauges, we have the size of the catchment, and so on, the slope, and the land use, and so on. As I said, this can be read in detail with this paper. That was a ground base for the artificial intelligence model Maria did at the end. What else can we say here? What is a spatial distribution of this aggregation process, or of this database? We did it for cities, and perhaps you know that in Germany we have this postcode, or everywhere we have this postal code, and even a big city like Dresden has several postal codes, and that was our basics. So the suburbs related to a postal code was our smallest identity for identifying an event related to a place. What do we have more here? Yes, the start times of the event, the duration, intensity of heavy rains, and so on. And if you have a smaller city here, like Moosburg, that is a small city in Bavaria, we can even distinguish between the old town and the other town. This is the picture again. I don't know why it is, but here you can see what I already said, that in densely populated areas you have more events than in more sparse areas. Okay, that was a database. The second one is more determining the routes of water, so all the little creeks, the slopes for entire Bavaria. We had a very precise digital elevation model, 1 by 1 meter. So it was quite easy to store all these water courses in a GIS toolbox with ArcGIS Pro. And we checked that our flow routes, together with sinks, if you have depressions, the depressions can be filled with water, that is logical, the water flows downhill to a depression, and also if you have bottlenecks like a culvert, for instance, a culvert through a bridge, under a bridge, we also consider these bottlenecks for backwater effects. And then we compared these easy GIS modeling, only because of topography, we compared it with a two-dimensional hydrodynamic model. The big advantage for this GIS approach is you don't need big computers. You can do it on the desktop computer, and you don't need high-performance supercomputers for the hydrodynamic model. It's nearly impossible to model the whole Bavaria in a hydrodynamic way. And with these effort, we could identify critical points just by the topography as an indicative map. So for instance, you have here a town, Obernzenn in Bavaria. These are the flow routes derived by the topographic analysis, and this is on the right-hand side, you see the hydrodynamic modeling. So you see many differences, of course. You know which routes which flow paths are endangered. You have some sinks here, so this building is also endangered, but you don't have the extent of the inundation, which is only be possible by hydrodynamic modeling, especially if you have no bottlenecks, no culverts, no throttles, so to say. But if you have this, like here's a street, and here you have a culvert, then we assume that for a big event, and that is I think this is a 100-year event with a duration of 9 hours, and 100-year precipitation event, we calculated the depth of these backwater, and the backwater is more or less very similar to the hydrodynamic model. So for this kind of configuration, you can live with a simple GIS box. And here again, here you have another throttle or bottleneck or two small culverts. Here you have this backwater effect, very similar, also with the depths for compared to the hydrodynamic model. But downstream of this bottleneck, you have only the water course, and here, of course, with the hydrodynamic model, you can model it in a more precise way. That was the GIS approach. Now coming to the artificial intelligence, that is related to a third paper. So the second paper I didn't mention, but there's a second paper also available. The third paper is now to derive flash flood susceptible areas. Here we need influencing factors, which parameters or which factors can affect inundation, flash flood inundation, and of course we need our data, and the data are mentioned here. We had in Bavaria nearly 2,000 events. We used 80% of this for training the artificial intelligence and 20% for validating our model, and then we have to check the accuracy of our artificial intelligence. So again, we have influencing factors, we have a database, we process the data, we classify the data, we train our artificial model with 80%, testing 20%, and then at the end we have this flash flood susceptibility map. Difficult word to pronounce for me. Good. Of course, we also added expert knowledge, which factors are really important, that you need a little bit hydrological and hydrodynamic understanding. And at the end, we choose the following: elevation, slope of the catchments, of the small catchments. So these are, this is not for the catchment, that is for the entire Bavaria, not related to catchment, just each pixel. It was 50 by 50 meters, each pixel. The slope, the landforms, land use, sealing degree, saturated hydraulic conductivity, permeability of the upper aquifer, distance to river, height above the nearest drainage, heavy rain hours. That are our 10 influencing factors related to each pixel. And we have also catchment-related influencing factors, that is a build-up area share, the agricultural area share, the Melton number, that is a number for the ruggedness of the catchment, the length area relation, because also the form of the catchment is important for concentrating the overland flow, the elongation ratio, and the relief. So these 16 influencing factors came into the machine, into the artificial machine. They have different importances. You can read that in the dissertation of Maria. I don't want to go into detail which are more important, but you can, of course, guess that the build-up area share is more important than the agricultural area share, and so on. And how did we perform the artificial intelligence model? It's not a neural network, it's decision trees, simple decision trees, which have a binary output, yes or no. So one decision tree here, for instance, for an animal, if you want to identify a bear or a hawk, so you can just ask, has it feathers, yes or no? Then you go to this branch, can it fly, yes or no? If yes, it could be a hawk. If no, it could be a pigeon. Yeah, for instance, this is a simple example, and we did this for each of these influence factors in a row. So it is called Cat Boost classifier. The software is available, so it was not so much programming work. Unfortunately, we had too less data. That is always a problem in data learning models, because the accuracy or specificity and sensitivity was 75% around. So from 4 trials, we have 1 fault and 3 right decisions. So we cannot really rely on this, but this model is extendable for future. And nevertheless, we have here this susceptibility map. We could draw it for the whole Bavaria, and we ranged it by a so-called natural break method in 4 classes. So it's a distribution, and we cut the distribution in 4 classes to identify low endangered areas, moderate endangered areas, high endangered areas, and very high endangered areas. Here you see the percentage, and that is the first overview in Bavaria where the flash floods is more likely to occur for the very high, and where you can more or less relax. You have a low probability. The last step of this was just to combine both maps. You remember the GIS map, which was only based on topography, and now this artificial map. So just to give you a small part of Bavaria, let's go to this westerly corner in Bavaria. We call it then reference map for the decision makers. So we have this AI-based map, so this susceptibility map, together with our flow paths derived from the 1 meter digital elevation model with all the sinks and the culvert backwater effects I have just explained, and combining both gives you a better view where your areas could be affected or not. Then we also, for the cities, we made an average value to have a better expectation for a greater area, but I don't want to go into detail. This map will be published of the Bavarian Environmental Agency, and so everybody can access this map. So the conclusions of my first part is flash floods can basically occur everywhere. That was one conclusion of the database. A statewide reference map for flash floods now exists for Bavaria, and the software is available, so you could do it in any country if you like. The map can be improved by new events, so I think this is really needed, because 75% is not really good, it's average. And flash flood susceptibility maps for holistic hazard assessments are the complement to flood hazard maps. It is not a substitute, it's complement. So we have here the advantage of rapid advancement of machine learning approaches, increasing the availability of event information in short computation time, but hazard maps are still necessary for detailed hazard analysis. I will come to this in the second part of my presentation. Here you have other problems. Which rainfall would you assume? How large is the runoff coefficient, and so on. We have big other problems for this detailed analysis. So the two-dimensional hydrodynamic models are suitable for this purpose, for hazard maps. And if you want to learn more about the project, it has finished unfortunately last year, but the webpage is still available. And if you want to read more, the 3 papers I have mentioned, just go to the dissertation of Maria Kaiser. It's a very extensive dissertation, so about 200 pages or 150 pages, and you will learn more about the details, what I just have mentioned. Yeah, that was the first part. Shall I proceed with the second? Okay. I'm in time. I'm still in time. I think I have 35 minutes. Okay. It's okay. I can. It's the same slide. So just proceeding with. Perhaps this is also interesting for you, how to create flash flood hazard maps for Bavaria. Not for the whole Bavaria, but for representative catchments. And this work was also mainly done by Dr. Karl Bruch. He's still at my chair as a postdoc, and he is a guy who knows everything about hydrodynamics, 2D hydrodynamics. What is a problem here if we want to go for details? So flash floods, we know now what are flash floods, or heavy rain-induced floods, better to say. We did it for 40 municipalities in Bavaria. Then the money and the time was over. The rest will be done by some engineering offices in the future, paid by the Bavarian government. We defined flash floods for short events with high intensity and high variability, usually smaller than 100 square kilometers. So here see a flash flood. There's a nice animation, but I skipped it. Normally, the time steps must be much shorter than 1 hour. So you cannot use a SWOT model, for instance, for that. You need at least time steps for 15 minutes, or better 5 minutes. The total water volume is usually small compared to big fluvial events. It's a short duration, high intensities, but a small volume. And therefore, the runoff coefficient is really important. If you miss the right infiltration rate, then you will get big difference in the runoff. And this triggers the peak discharge, and the intensity of the flash flood. So this is a remaining problem, to specify correctly the runoff coefficient or the infiltration rate, because that is not saturation excess, that is mainly infiltration excess. And another problem for these small catchments, normally you don't have gauging stations. We had the luck from the work of Maria that we collected all data, and we found 40 municipalities in Bavaria with gauges. Nauru catchment has a gauge, I think, so this is possible now to calibrate your model. Otherwise, you have to use uncalibrated models, and because of this problem here with the runoff coefficient, uncalibrated models have a problem for guessing the right flash flood amount. Good, and the rain is a big problem. Hopefully the animation works. No. What is my problem here? Perhaps it works. I have to leave the laser pointer. Sorry for that. I think now it works. Yeah, here you see a 5-minute time step of rainfall, and red means 2 millimeters per 5 minutes, blue 8 millimeters per 5 minutes, and you see the rain intensity is far away from uniformly distributed about the catchment. The catchment is the black thing here, and you have seen that, the intensities vary greatly within 1 hour. Yeah, and we have radar data, so we explored all the radar data. The radar data is not a quantitative, it's only a qualitative assessment. You have to calibrate the radar data to the rain gauges, and then you have an impression about the spatial temporal formation of rainfall in your catchment. How to model it? on the one hand side, you can model it with a hydrological model. So this is the normal steps of runoff generation. So to estimate the infiltration rate and the runoff coefficient, then you have the runoff concentration within the catchment, and at least the routing in the river itself. We used here different hydrological models. One is a VASIM model from Zurich. It's also free available. VASIM ETH, the former name, now it's VASIM. And the LASIM model, you know, Professor Kadenya, you know the LASIM model as well. We use it also for calibration. But this needs, of course, calibration. On the other hand, we used a purely hydrodynamic model. We called it Hydrodynamic Rainfall Runoff Model, HDRRM. That is a two-dynamic hydrodynamic model with a modal runoff generation. So you have here a triangular mesh, and for each node or for each triangle, we estimated the infiltration by a simple soil conservation service curve number method, which is widely used. So we can skip the concentration and routing part from a hydrological model because we do it all together. We route from each pixel to another pixel in a two-dimensional way, and the generation was done by the soil conservation curve number method. Okay, let's see the results, if this is worthwhile, all these efforts. Of course, again, you need this digital elevation model, 1 meter raster, precipitation with calibrated radar-based rainfall data, the soil classes, and the land use for the CN value. So we choose Telemark 2D. We also made it with HydroS 2D. This is a more German one. Telemark has a big advantage. It's a French model by the French electricity company, and now it's freely available. You can download the Telemark 2D model. Many also in Africa are interested in that. For instance, for the Benin area, we will also use this 2D model for the Fury flood model, Fury flood study. And now we tried to calibrate the Telemark 2D model for Simbach. This is a small catchment, and a neighboring catchment for the validation. Let's see if this model is sufficient. Precipitation for 5-minute steps with Radiolan, with radar data. Each 5-minute step you have this contribution or distribution of intensities in the catchment. So the catchment is around 30 square kilometers. Digital elevation model with 2 main streams coming to the city. The city of Simbach is located here. We have the roughness for the velocity estimation of the Telemark model, and we have the CN values for the infiltration. And these are the 2 catchments again. Simbach, it's 45 square kilometers, sorry, and the neighboring catchment Triftan, they had almost the same precipitation event. It was the same event, a 100-year period, 1st of June 2016. It was really a devastating event with also some victims in the city of Simbach. It costs more than 500 million euros, the damages there. After calibration, we could get the hydrograph very well, and also the volume of this is the volume curve, the sum curve of the volume. And here's the hydrograph. This dotted line, we skipped it because in reality, this was the original hydrograph, but that was due to a dam break during the event. And we don't want to model the dam break as well. So this is the black line is a real hydrograph, a measured hydrograph without the dam break. And you see the results are quite well after calibrating it. And with these calibrated values, we validated in the neighboring catchment, and we were very satisfied that this validation works very well. So we said, okay, that's a good model. Let's do it for other catchments as well. So we went to our 40 catchments throughout Bavaria with all these sizes, less than 100 square kilometers, and we had measured discharges. Therefore, we could check if the model is right or wrong. Because we don't want to work with a calibration again for each of these catchments, for the Telemark model, we just assumed 3 initial moisture conditions, SCS1, SCS2, SCS3. Perhaps you know that the curve number will change related to the initial soil moisture. So for dry condition, medium conditions, wet conditions, we run the model. We run the model Telemac. The other models you can see here, VASIM model and LASIM model, are calibrated models for each catchment. These are hydrological models, LASIM and VASIM, and on the right-hand side you have more empirical unit hydrograph models, so very simple models. Perhaps we should not go too much into this row. So here, Telemac, the first are the Telemac models, and you see with the wetter the preconditions are, the higher will be the volume of the flood wave. And this is a difference. On the y-axis you see the difference of the total volume, the end volume, compared to the measured volume. And here we are overestimating the volume. Here on the medium we are quite well, and here we are underestimating the volume for dry preconditions. The calibrated models are quite good. Of course, they have been calibrated. The first 3 box plots is an uncalibrated event for the 40 catchments. And the good thing is here, if you only choose events which have a high recurrence interval, so the higher return interval, so 50 years or more, then you squeeze the uncertainty of the box plots. And I would say medium conditions or wet conditions are suitable for flood inundation modeling. The same is valid for the other 4 hydrological models. Coming to the peak difference, perhaps this is more important because you want to know the highest peak. This peak difference is here calculated as a specific discharge to normalize all the events. Here you see again higher peaks with wetter preconditions and a big spread of all events. And if you go for the high events, for the 8 high events, there's still a spread. But here, perhaps for the peak, should go more for the wet preconditions. And the hydrological models, even they are calibrated, they are not very good. They also have a big spread. And for the time to peak, the last slide here, I would also say the wetter, the faster, and the wet preconditions have a good relation related to the difference. Here you are the hours difference from the measured peaks. All the empirical models are a little bit out of reality, so to say. Good. So I think we can assume that the Telemac model is quite okay. It has a big effort. So we just thought about how to make it easier, and for generating scenarios. Yeah, for the maps you don't need real events. You need a good model, but you have to choose a scenario for the inundation. Just for designing something, designing a reservoir, or what you want to do as countermeasures for flash floods. So we assume now pluvial events combined with fluvial events. So the pluvial events was modeled here in the inner city and the endangered areas with 100 millimeter rainfall in 1 hour. So really a heavy rain on the city itself. It was divided in segments of 5 square kilometers, because this is more or less the cell size of a thunderstorm for a pluvial event. And for the fluvial event in the catchment, which was also modeled by hydrology, and the fluvial was more modeled by the Telemac, so there was also a combination of hydrological model and Telemac model, hydrodynamic model. For the fluvial, we had 2 return periods, 100 year and 1000 year, for different durations. And the worst case we checked. And here you see some results. We have water zoning, of course, with different elevations or water depth, but we have also the product of water level or water height, combined with the velocities, multiplied with the velocities. So you get square meters per second. And there are some assumptions if this product water height or water depth multiplied with velocity is between 0.7 and 1.3 square meters per second. The instability of children is there, so children will be washed away, and if it's higher than 1.3, even adults cannot stand and they will be floating downwards. So this is a map for this. We have also shear stresses. We could calculate the shear stresses in the flowing part of the river, and this could give you a hint about erosion problems during a flash flood. And of course, the real hazard maps is inundation maps with a water depth. Additionally, this product velocity times water depth, where you assume very dangerous areas for being floating away by the water power. So to summarize that, I'm just in time for this long presentation. Hydrodynamic rainfall runoff modeling has proven to be an alternative to classical hydrological rainfall runoff simulations. HDRRM using the hydrodynamic solver Telemark 2D with SCS-CN infiltration was validated in 34 case studies. By the way, we will improve this model with a green and empty approach because we are not really satisfied with the curve number method. So there's also an option to include green and empty model as an infiltration model. The advantages is a possibility to use a model uncalibrated. The goodness of a fit improves for more severe events, as I have shown, with higher return periods. More information can be extracted directly from the model in high resolution, water depth, flood extent, flow vectors, and shear stresses. But of course, we have the big disadvantage of high computational needs and the effort to set up the model. It's much more time consuming. And we have still the problem, which are the real initial conditions. For designing a flood event, I would recommend at least medium wet conditions or better wet conditions as initial conditions, but it has a big impact of the volume and the peak of the flash flood. And for predictions, we have still the problem of reliable prediction of precipitation that is not yet solved. This is some literature from my talk, and I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof, for that session. I think we are done with the flood management, and next is drought management.
Shall I proceed?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So we are hurrying up. So hopefully it was not too complicated. I know not all of you are hydrologists, but I didn't know the audience, so I thought I give some hydrology lectures. The drought is perhaps a little bit more simple, hopefully. Okay, also two parts, but not so lengthy. So we will start with another doctoral candidate. It's Lu Tian from China. Her dissertation is about drought estimation and drought propagation signals in Central Asia. So she works on a large-scale model using products which are freely available. So one product I have written it down here is a GLDAS model, that is a catchment land surface model combined with GRACE, Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment. The other is a GLEAM model, Global Land Evaporation Amsterdam model. So she does not perform hydrological models. She used free analysis data or these global data from the GLDAS catchment land surface model and the GLEAM model. So her main task is the time evolution of drought signals among different hydrological components in Central Asia. That means, you know, perhaps the common SPI in this index, the standardized precipitation index, SPI, coming solely from rainfall, but then you have also indices more related to hydrology, like the evapotranspiration deficit index or the soil moisture index, or the runoff index. And for this you need these models I just mentioned, the Gleams model and the GLDAS model. The task is time evolution. So on the one hand, the frequency, the duration of each kind of drought signal, and the propagation time between the hydrological drought and the meteorological drought. Normally you can assume that the meteorological drought becomes first, and then the consequences of the hydrological drought come next. And how large is this lag between these kind of droughts? And how is the spatial area? And because this is a large paper, so that was her first paper, I can pass it around if you like, but you can also download it. I will pass it around for the hydrologists here, the paper that is based on this graphic. So I only want to explain the methodology. The former drought indices are based on 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, and you get different results. And normally you are very confused if you read 4 papers for drought indices for the same area, for different time scales and different time periods. You get different results, and you don't know what you should really think about it. So this approach is based on a daily time step, by remote sensing data, reanalysis data. For the precipitation, we used Bayesian reanalysis model, and for the hydrological drought, the models I just mentioned. So we had daily data, but of course we have to smooth the data, and therefore we accumulate 30 days, 30 single days, and made the stamp here on the 30th day. So we calculated. Let's start with the precipitation index with the SPI. We calculated 30 days, make a stamp here, starting with the second day, 30 days, stamp here. The third day, 30 days, we have a value here for the 33rd day. Then we analyzed, I perhaps can use this here. Yeah, so perhaps you can see more. We analyzed we have the values. Of course, we have the values here. Perhaps I can use a laser pointer again. No, that's not possible. So we go for the. You have so on the left corner there's day 29, day 30, day 31, and so on. So you have to start with day 30, then you sort the data for each day of the year, so starting with a day, here you have the consequence of the year, and here you sort it for the same day over the years. So let's say we have today the 30th of March for this year, for the last year 30th of March. Now that is the second step, sorry. Here you sort it just in an increasing way, but for each day, 30th of March, 1st of April, and so on. So you have a consequence. The driest day has a I, so the first index 1, and the wettest day has an index 20 or 25, depending on the years you have measured or you have considered here. And that is done for each day. So just an empirical distribution, cumulative distribution of the days. And at the end, you can recalculate, so you can calculate the index, the standardized index from the wetness and the dryness of the data you have ranked here. And this is done for each day again. So 1st of February, 1st of February the next day, and so on, for each year and here each day. So you have a timeline of each day with the corresponding dryness index, because you know from the distribution, from the empirical distribution, how dry or wet is your current day, accumulated over 30 days. And which probability distribution we use? We used here the Dringerton empirical distribution, and for 0 values, the Weibull distribution. That is explained in the paper, but this was the smart way to admit also 0 values. So I will skip this big graph. So we have a timeline of dry and wet years, and you can do this, and of course this was done for every pixel. So every pixel of these global models has a 0.25 times 0.25 degree. So that means approximately 770 square kilometers is each pixel for Central Asia. So it was a big area, not Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, part of China and so on, a very large area. And we assume a drought if more than 10 pixels are affected with an SPI -1. For instance, you have a threshold and then you cluster and classify the pixels if they are beyond the threshold or not. And if you have more than 10 pixels, then you have a drought area. Then it's not for purpose, it's really a real drought area. We go through all the days. Here you see the pixel numbers for the days T1 until Tn. And you have the spatial area of one drought event, but we also want to know the combination of the drought areas over the drought period. And the combination of the drought areas over the drought period is just adding all these initial, for the day, the drought areas for one day. The condition is here that it must have an overlap of at least 1 pixel so that the drought area is connected over time. And then with a summation, you get the overall drought area for this drought period. You do it not only for the precipitation, you do it also for the soil moisture with a model for the evaporation deficit and for the runoff deficit, and then you can draw a hydrograph or timeline for all these drought events, and then you can analyze the duration of the drought events, the extent of the drought event, the frequency, and also the time lag between these different drought events. That was all. It's quite simple, but very time-consuming, getting all the data, analyzing the data, making the statistics, and so on. But this is explained in the paper, and therefore I cannot go to the results. I think I have already taken 9 minutes of my presentation, and I want to go to a more practical presentation of drought management in the second part. You can download this paper also freely for checking the results and getting more information. By the way, the first author was based on the master thesis of Sarah Ho. She's a very good student, and the PhD student was only a second author because main work was done by Sarah. Good. Coming to the second part. That is related to Germany again, to Bavaria. My PhD student Lucas Alcamo just started with his PhD work. The name, this is a long, lengthy name, Experimental and Model-Based Examination of Nature-Based Water Management Strategies for an Increase of the Resiliency of Forests with Regard to Droughts. So here we want to go for really management strategies. We have the problem in Bavaria that we had 3 consecutive years of drought, of 2 less rainfall in Bavaria, 2018, 19, and 20. And nearly half of the trees are affected. Here you see really dying trees in northern Bavaria. Even, especially in summer times, we have this reduction of precipitation, increased risk of drought, but also, I discussed this with Professor Gardenia already, we have these drought seasons, a long period of drought, and then heavy precipitation events in between. So sometimes the overall sum of the year is not changing very much, but the consistency or the persistency of droughts and rainfall is changing. Long periods of droughts, heavy rain events in between. And so our goal is to store the water for the heavy precipitation events in the catchment that can be used for drought periods. Normally, if you don't store the water, you have roads, you have flow paths, the water is really gone. It goes, in this case, to the North Sea and it's really, really gone. So we have to retain the water in the catchment. So there's also pilot project in Slovakia, this for heavy storm events. You cannot see it so clearly, but they invented also some measures here, some some constructive measures for to stop the water, to give the water time to infiltrate with this, on the left-hand side, with its barriers, or ponds, of course, or land use change, and so on. And we will mimic this, management measures also in our catchment. So I already told you the question is, can we retain the water in the forest? We will measure it and we will model it. So we have a small catchment of 5 hectares only in the Franconia forest. As I told you, 50% of the trees are really endangered and damaged by drought. And even if you summarize the last 30 years with the recent years, so here is the precipitation, the light blue is 30 years average in that region from 61 to 90, and the 30 years average in that region from 91 to 2020. And even for this long average time, you see that you have less precipitation in April and May and June. So that is a fact. That is not arbitrary. That is a 30 years average, that you have less precipitation in the spring months, and a little bit, yeah, you have less precipitation overall, but in October, November, December, January, February, it's not so important, but in the spring months. And at the other end, the 30 years average of the temperature, you see the increase, overall increase of temperature compared to the 60s to 90s, from the 90s to the 20s now, of about more than 1 centigrade. So this is really alarming, because these are average values. It should be smoothed out if it's arbitrary variance, but no, it's not a variance related, it's really a matter of fact. Okay, by the way, the location is here. Here you see Bavaria. Perhaps you don't know where Bavaria is. This is Germany, Amsterdam. I flew from Amsterdam to Nairobi, and here in the very southeast of Germany we find Bavaria, and in the northwest of Bavaria we find our location on the Franconia forest. Yeah, so how can we retain the water? We need a very exact surface model, because we want to retain the water in small depressions. Yeah, so it's a local thing here, not with big reservoirs. We made a LiDAR survey with a matrix drone, and we flew about 200 points per square meter. Here you can see all the little forests, and it's very difficult to look through the forest, but the forest had no leaves in the moment. It was done just 1 month ago, so we had some spots where we could identify the ground. So at the end we had a 10 centimeter raster file for the ground. And here you see some picture. How can we interpret it? So the colors determines different heights, elevations. And you see here, if you have a good eyes, you see a forest road, a normal forest road that can be identified clearly, and the difference is only 20 centimeters or so. But you can also identify these back roads. So these roads are used very seldom, because it's only used for pulling the trees, the cut trees out of the forest. So they are not used very often. This is a normal back tree here, and you can see, perhaps it's not so visible here, you can see differences in the elevation for these back roads. And we have some artifacts here. These are trees, single trees, and also dead wood. We have to clean it before we use the digital elevation model. Measurements, we have on the top of the hill, a climate station, one at the bottom of the hill, and soil moisture measurements in high resolution, and we have 2 transects of soil moisture for different depth in a daily time step, because you have to do it manually. So we have different climate stations, different tipping buckets or rainfall gauges here, because the heterogeneity in a forest is very high because of the interception of the trees. We digged out 2 1.8 meter holes, depth holes, and introduced in these holes our loggers, our FDR loggers, so FDR senders for soil moisture. And for these transects, we used a manual thing with these rods, these steel rods. We left it in the soil for different depths. Here you see the different depths, and we can manually measure the soil moisture by putting this device on the rods on a daily time step. For the gauging station, we have a higher resolution, 15 minutes resolution. And here you see the result of the rainfall for the recent months and the soil moisture distribution in the different depth. And you can see, perhaps you cannot see, but there's a distinct reaction from the rainfall to the soil moisture propagation in different depth. So here a profile of number 1 of the hill mounted soil moisture measurement point, and you see the increase of soil moisture due to rainfall. We are just in the beginning, so I cannot show you more results here. This is for the transects where we have only daily measurements in distinct depth, but also by subtracting the depths, because the rods are in 15 centimeter, 30 centimeter long, 45, 60 centimeters. We subtract the rods from each other, and so we get also an impression of the soil moisture distribution in different depth. So as I said, it's just a spot of the 10th of February. We have to measure it for the whole year. And what can we do? So we have different possibilities for retained water in the forest. One way is to put some litter here. It's called Reisig-Matten of the crown material of the trees, that the overland flow is stopped or reduced, and so we have the water has more time to infiltrate. We can create some ponds by digging out. You have these guidance, perhaps you know it from hiking, so it's very common also in Germany. If you have a hiking path, every 100 or 200 meters, you have these little creeks, so to say, to divert the water towards the forest. Perhaps I can show it a little bit. Oh, sorry, that was a wrong one. Show it more clearly here. So this is just a small diverting device to divert the water from the road towards the forest. And damming of old back roads is also possible with what you see here, just damming with wood. And the last thing would be using dead wood, which you find in the forest, and using the dead wood by aligning the dead wood perpendicular to the slope, so the water can also be stopped. All small measures with much handwork, but we hope that this is worthwhile to do. We will measure one of these measures will be measured. I don't know, we didn't decide yet, but I think we go for the deadwood and see the effect of the deadwood. And the other measures will be simulated and evaluated, because you cannot measure all and everything. And therefore we will use a hydrogeosphere model. The hydrogeosphere model is a physically based hydrological model. The good thing is the unsaturated zone is modeled in a 3D way. So we use a 3D Richards equation, and the overland flow is described by the 2D Saint-Venant equation. Macropores can be considered, which is very important, especially in forests. Evapotranspiration is a boundary condition, and we work together with the School of Life Science at TUM. They have a special forest evapotranspiration model. It's called BALANCE by my colleague Thomas Rötzer. So we will combine the evapotranspiration with a hydrogeosphere model. And we have to calibrate it only with the soil moisture measurements, because we have no discharge available. Therefore, because we also want to check if this model is really good or bad, that is related to this uncertainty estimation of models, we will check it with the Telemac model for finding out where the pros and cons of the hydrogeosphere, and with the VASIM model. Again, these are our models we already have used for the flash flood modeling I've just told you. And therefore, perhaps we find more processes by comparison of these models. So we have to conclude and to summarize, we have a good coverage of soil moisture measurements in this small area. We have a very high definition digital elevation model available. We will examine measures for drought mitigation by implementation in the study area, 1 or perhaps 2, let's see. The rest will be modeled, and the research questions are, can the measures increase infiltration substantially so that the water is stored in the soil for trees during droughts? Is a physically based modeling with an integration of tree growth models possible? So the connection with the School of Life Science with their model, and we have no discharge measurements. Can comparison with other models increase the understanding of the relevant processes? And it's an interdisciplinary research because we cooperate with the Chair of Forest Growth and Yield Science and the Bavarian Ministry of Forest and Forest Management. Yeah, so I kept my time more or less, and yeah, thank you for your attention. I should go on? Okay. Now we come to the heavy part. Okay, the presentations are here. No. Mm-hmm. Here we are. Okay, thank you very much. So I don't know why I have to talk a third lecture. You want to go for lunch, I think. Shall we skip this topic? Or do you, what is your opinion?
Yes,
you want to see it, or?
Yes.
Proceed, okay. Because this is a topic we should talk about hours and hours. That is not an easy task, dealing with uncertainties in hydrological modeling. I prepared two, that are not my papers, but these are fundamental papers you should read, and you can download it freely. I also pass it around. It can be kept here, no problem. It's about uncertainty analysis and sensitivity analysis. Yeah, it's not my favorite topic, but it's important. That is Dr. Jingshui Wang. She's a water quality modeler, as I mentioned, but she's also very engaged in uncertainty estimation, as well as Professor Kiogna, my deputy, is also an expert in uncertainty estimation. So I took this presentation a little bit from her, therefore you can see her again, and she asked a good question: why do we always need a band in high quality publications nowadays? Yeah, I think 30 years ago you had the measured values and you have your simulation and that's it, and you were happy if the simulations matches the measurements. And nowadays every publication needs this bandwidth. Why is it so important? Yeah, so we can ask ourselves some questions. You have a model you are most familiar with, and which question can you ask? What elements does it contain? What information or data do you need to set it up? What do the equations look like? What is a form of the model results? How much do you trust your model? What are the factors that you trust or not trust? Yeah, that is going a little bit more into details of your model, squeeze a little bit more information out of the model. And this here is a nice overview of a model that you become clear what is really in your model. Perhaps we can also highlight it a little bit here. So you have, let's go for flood inundation simulation, because we have spoken about that. You have inputs, that is river inflow observations. You have also inputs as parameters, because you have to somehow calibrate the parameters. And your model has a spatial and also temporal resolution. Yeah, that should be also in your mind. Perhaps the digital elevation model is already given and you don't have to change it. It's for granted. And then you simulate your flood inundation. You get a scalar output function, perhaps root mean square error of your flood inundation, because you want to fit your data to the observations. So simulate the data y to your observations x1. And then you perform your parameters, and then at the end you get a good result, and then you can calculate the maximum flood extent and so on. Yeah, so there's a coupling for the scalar output function, and the scalar output function, it's a goodness of fit function. It depends which function you use, which results you get. So that is also a question: is this an appropriate function? Okay. So perhaps you should draw something like this before you start modeling, that you have a clear idea what is going in, what is going out, and which equations you use in your model itself. And I found a nice guidance document on the development, evaluation, and application of environmental models from EPA. This is the link. Hopefully it works. Oh, that was an experiment. I just try to link. Yeah, it comes here. So it's a guidance on the development, evaluation, and application of environmental models. And oops, I can. It's blocked somehow. It needs a little bit of time. And here you find everything you might want to know about model complexity and model evaluation. And in the evaluation, hopefully I can scroll down. It needs too much time. Sorry for that. Here we are. Here we go. Here you have sensitivity and uncertainty analysis as one chapter or subchapter, and later on you find also some hints in the appendices how to apply material on quality assurance planning and protocols, best practices for model evaluation. It's a nice compendium of how to model in a correct way. So, but it's freely available under this link, and let's go for a short summary of uncertainty analysis and sensitivity analysis. So that is what you have here. You have always an input. You want to model perhaps the plant growth of these sunflowers. So what you need for an input: radiation, temperature, humidity. You have to water the flowers. You always need water for everything. Water is life, and perhaps some nutrients. Then you model it, and you get an output. Very deterministic, and you are happy. But in reality, everything is uncertain. The measurements are uncertain. What you're applying to the plants is uncertain. The water supply is uncertain. And the model itself is uncertain. So your output is uncertain. Therefore, you need to have these bands. We state that the input factors are not only the initial and boundary conditions, so what you measure, but also the equations is an input factor, the parameters, and the resolution. And everything is related to uncertainty. So every of these things, perhaps there are more input factors, have an error term. So unfortunately, our deterministic model X with some equations come to a solution big X is added with some error terms or uncertainty terms, and you get a distribution of your results. And for instance, starting with the boundaries, so the forcing data, so the measurement data, normally you say to take it for granted, but for instance, discharge. Oh, we have a discharge and we want to match the discharge, the measured discharge, to our model discharge. But even a discharge rating curve, a normal discharge rating curve, can be very, very uncertain. Yeah, that is just from a paper. That is the upper bar here, where you have 60 to 80%, even especially for high flows, compared to an ADCP measurement, which is very expensive, which is very low uncertainty, that is these are the dots here on the bottom on the right-hand side. That is due to ADCP measurements. So you have really to consider how certain or reliable are your measurements. Okay, that is the boundary conditions. Normally you assume an error term which has no bias, but there could be also biases in the error term. The parameters of your model, okay, you can read it for yourself. For the parameters that are calibrated on the basis of measurements for the model output variables, parameters uncertainties exist whenever erroneous or limited time series of measurements are used for calibration, or whenever the calibration procedure is not optimal. So we assume measurement errors or the calibration itself is not optimal. So parameters should cover your measurements, and there is also a range of parameter values for your model. Measurements of errors and detailed physically based models are often over-parameterized. This is the thing of equifinality. You have too many parameters and you cannot find the parameter sets. You find different behavioral parameter sets which are equally good in the sense of goodness of fit, and therefore it's difficult or impossible to derive a unique or optimal set of parameter values. That is, you have to live with, and perhaps you know the glue estimation of Bevan, and that is exactly his topic. For instance here, that was about parameters. Now we go to model structures, and also your model structure is either you have less parameters, so the danger of over-parameterization is less, but the simplification might be too crude. So here the simplification for a biological oxygen demand is perhaps not including all the processes compared to the right-hand side. You have more processes here, but you need more parameters. So it's a vicious cycle. Either you have more complicated model which represents the reality better for the model structure, but the cost is the parameters and the equifinality of parameters. On the other hand, more simple model, more robust models, but perhaps you miss important processes of the real world. And the output, also a problem. The output, as I mentioned already, is a scalar function, for instance, the RMSE, the root mean squared error, and depending on the output, you will get different results and different parameters. So there's also a feedback loop, which scalar function you use for your output. So either you have this objective function problem, so the goodness of fit, which will you use? Do you combine it, or do you use only part of it? Or you have a prediction function that is also a scalar function, but then you have absence of observations and you cannot be sure if the prediction is really viable or reliable. Based on your simulation goals, how confident do you think the simulation results of your model are? If you feel that it's not certain, what input factors may cause it, so be clear about the uncertainty of the input factors. Are there forcing data, parameters, or model structure? And is it because there are too few measured values for comparison, or the time accuracy of the input data is too low? So really think about the purpose of your model results and the appropriate structure of your model. You can use simple models for robust estimation, that's no problem. Or if you want to go more into the processes, then please think about, do you have enough data, measured data, for fixing all these parameters? And how is the spread of your forcing data? For instance, we talked about precipitation. It's not easy to get an aerial precipitation if you have only 3 or 4 gauges, and no radar data available, for instance. So if you can answer the above question, it means that you have begun to think about your system seriously, and you have begun to use your brain to do uncertainty and sensitivity analysis, of course subjectively. Then now we come to this SA and UA, and that is a wide field, and perhaps also a wide field, because what measure should you apply? Sensitivity analysis is SA and uncertainty analysis is UA. UA focuses on quantifying the uncertainty in the output of the model. The purpose is not to somehow reduce uncertainty, just the quantifying of the output. And sensitivity analysis is focusing on apportioning output uncertainty to different sources of uncertainty. So which parameter or which input factor has which uncertainty in it. While different in focus and objectives, uncertainty analysis and global sensitivity analysis often use similar mathematical techniques. The forward propagation of uncertainty by Monte Carlo simulation, which is commonly employed in many uncertainty estimation methodologies, is also used to perform the initial step of sampling-based general sensitivity analysis. Yeah, that is much work, but you have also some benefits because you understand your model better and you know where are the weak points of your process and what are the strong points, and perhaps where can you find measures to reduce uncertainty in your model or in your measurements or in your process description. So for instance, calibration, verification, diagnostic evaluation can be supported by UA-SA. You can, as I said, perform uncertainty reduction. You can analyze the dominant controls of a system, and you can support also robust decision making. So now the problem begins. There are many software available on the market. I think too many software products, so I don't use now the detailed view. There are hundreds of uncertainty estimation analysis software, so therefore I passed around these two papers because they give a little bit of guideline which uncertainty estimation or analysis software is appropriate for your problem. Okay, I already said it's uncertainty analysis propagates sources of uncertainty through the model to generate statistical moments and probability distributions for various model outputs. Uncertainty strategies include approximation and sampling methods. For instance, this little equation fx is x plus 1, but x has a normal distribution, so the answer will be around, if you put in 1 as a mean value, there will be 2 the result, but with a standard deviation of 0.1. That is a very simple guiding through the uncertainty estimation through a model. I don't read everything here, but that is exactly what I just have shown, the approximation, sort of propagation of uncertainty through your model. There are many different estimation. There could be a point estimation, there could be the whole distribution could be propagated through the model. And of course, sampling methods are also important for your input. That could be a simple Monte Carlo sampling with a big effort of computations, or you can use Latin hypercube sampling or other combination of samplings. I don't want to go into details. Everything is written in that paper. Bayesian inference is a very common approach for uncertainty estimation, because a big benefit is that you have a prior distribution of your parameters, and you can reduce the probability or the PDF by implementing the measured data to get a posterior distribution. That is also tricky and a little bit dependent on the likelihood function to reduce the prior distribution, but it's commonly used. There's some criticism for this. I have another paper on my desk, but this is more a philosophical paper, how people use uncertainty estimation just for using it to have this error band, but not knowing the implications for that. That is a mining field, I would say. If you like, you can have also a copy of this paper, but this is highly philosophical of Graniering and Hoshin-Gupta. Okay, but it's widely used, the Bayesian methods, because our field, we usually need to compare our simulations results with measurements to estimate parameters, which is very in line with the Bayesian method framework. So you can simultaneously estimate parameters and do the uncertainty analysis because of this updating of the prior distribution to a posterior distribution. And so you can simultaneously treat uncertainty of all inputs and the response data. What is the workflow? You choose the input factors subject to uncertainty estimation, so the very first picture is very important. Which input factors are really relevant for your uncertainty estimation? You define the prior probability distribution for the input factor subject to uncertainty estimation. So that is a workflow for Bayesian analysis. Defining a likelihood function with a sensitive for that procedure, and sampling strategy, it's also sensitive, but perhaps Monte Carlo MC methods for inducing posterior distribution from prior distributions. So you have to read all this mathematical stuff, and the likelihood function is, as I said, very decisive here. We can skip that. And the second paper I passed around is about sensitivity analysis. I like it very much because here you get really a guideline for different complicated sensitivity analysis. You can do it only for one parameter itself, so one at a time estimation of sensitivity, or all at a time, so you have also the interdependency of different parameters, or you can also go for the variance-based methods, the fast algorithm, so not only checking plus and minus of parameters, but checking the whole distribution and sliding the whole distribution through your model for sensitivity analysis. I don't, because I talked a lot today and the 20 minutes are just now over, so this is a workflow also given in the papers, how to assess uncertainty or credibility of your model, and these are the two papers you shouldn't miss for an introduction of that, and then you go to this desert of uncertainty analysis methods, but for a good paper you need at least to choose one of that. It's difficult to understand uncertainty estimation because it's very abstract. We should always keep the most fundamental mission of SA and UA in mind. Make up some simple model that help you to understand it. Do many numerical experiments in your model to test your hypothesis and to refresh your understanding. The good thing is we have software available, so you don't have to program it for yourself. And this is a proverb, there's nothing certain but the uncertain, and that will be my last word. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prof, for such a great presentation and the time that you've taken. Thank you so much. So we are now going to the next section. Thank you. Let's give a clap to Prof. Thank you so much. So we are now going to the section of question and answer. If there is something that you need to be clarified with respect to the presentation that have been made, all the way from research activities, current projects in the chair of hydrology through Professor Marcus, all the presentations in drought management, flood management, dealing with uncertainties, and maybe you need some clarification regarding the seed project or about the collaboration in general. So feel free to share your question and you are going to be responded. For the online participants, you can drop a chat or you can raise your hand if you have a question. The floor is open. Any question?
So maybe I can start off. Yeah, thank you, Prof, for the exciting presentations that you have made on the work that you're doing and the students you're working with, particularly on flood management and also the other part, which is drought. I was just interested in knowing maybe how you use dead wood for retaining water in the forest. I believe there is one of the slides where you showed you use some kind of wood embankment, but then there's that other option where you use dead wood. Given that dead wood sometimes will be rotting, how do you utilize it for retaining water from precipitation? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. In the new philosophy in German forests is not to clean the forest from falling trees. So we keep it there if they are falling down, and because of the drought we have more trees falling. And the dead wood will exist, I will guess, 10 or 15 years at least before they are rotten. And if we just align the dead wood perpendicular to the flow paths, and in a distance of, let's say, 10 meters or 15 meters, we have enough in the forests, then the overland flow will start somehow, but it will stop just because there is a tree or a trunk lying perpendicular to the flow. And this, it's an experiment, I cannot grant it, but this would have more time for the water to infiltrate into the soil. This is one measure, and if this is not enough, we need volunteers, and we have some volunteers. We can also modulate the digital elevation model with really small ponds. Then you have really a little earth wall, for instance, for retaining water. But I hope and I think that will help a lot, but we can additionally modulate the soil surface. Yeah, and for these roads, for pulling out the trees, some of these roads are already blocked with an earth wall that we can retain water. Then you can see it clearly. So that is depending on the forest manager, if he allows us to build a wall, or a dam, a little dam to retain water. But we have a good cooperation with these forest managers.
Another question from
Prof. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was very enlightening. Of course, very detailed. We maybe have gotten 50%, the other 50%. So, but it's interesting, especially that research on increasing infiltration in the forests, because in our case, we usually think that the opportunity to moderate or to buffer the flows in the forests are very little. We always imagine that forests are perfect solutions to flood management, so you don't have to do anything. So most of the time we are looking for solutions in the agricultural areas. Of course, I realize that in your catchment, you have more land at the forest perhaps than agriculture. I don't know. Yeah, so it's surprising in that way, so that in our area we are saying the forest is a perfect solution, and you shouldn't look for any opportunity to enhance infiltration in the forest, whereas in this case you're trying. I'm interested to see what comes out of that research. Then the other thing is when you're using these hydrodynamic models, I heard you say you have access to 1 meter DEM, and one of the challenges we have, at least in this part of the world, if we are relying on DEMs that are available online, I think the finest resolution now is like 12.5 meters. So I'm wondering whether that one meter DEM is freely available or is only for use in Germany. I had another question about these very over-parameterized models like SWOT. Of course, you get the benefit in that they are distributed or semi-distributed, so you are able to capture the non-homogeneity in land cover, in soils and everything. but you also come with the challenge of getting to know which of the parameters will give you the best fit. And sometimes when you use these automatic calibration algorithms, I think there is a possibility to get very many solutions. Now people are talking about these simple models with like 4 parameters, like the AGR, which work very well. But the only challenge is they work very well for small catchments, because the input for rainfall, most of the time it is 1 point. But the question is, if, for example, Mr. Pablo takes SWAT, he will probably work very well in the soils and in the land cover, but the cropping systems in the place where you're going to model, including how people are managing, for example, residues, when they plant, when they harvest, it has an implication on the water balance. But many people who use these over-parameterized models don't work in every component very well. They spend more time in one part. Very few people actually look at the crop growth model in SWAT, which is very important for the water balance. I've seen that even residue management will have a bigger impact. So you get a loaded model, but you are not paying attention to every detail that has importance in the water balance.
Thank you for these 3 questions. Hopefully I remember the first. The first was about forests, forest and agriculture. You're absolutely right. The forests are the best coverage land use for retaining water. There are the 2 things why we started with the forest. For the agricultural area, we have more agricultural area than forest. We have about 60% agricultural area and 30% forests. But it is very difficult to manage measures or to introduce measures in agricultural areas because of the farmers. So we have to ask the farmers, can I build something here, buffer stripes, green stripes, can I close your drainages and so on? They would say, no, it's my land, I don't want to do that. So we started with the forest. But we have already contacts to the Wasserwirtschaftsamt, it's the local water authority in Bavaria. They have a project with farmers. And when I come back to Germany, we will communicate benefits. So forests and agriculture is together, and I'm with you that the agricultural efficiency or impact is much larger than in the forest. But on the other hand, the infiltration capacity in agricultural land is per se higher because of the fertile soils and good soils, and in the forest you have these bad soils with low infiltration. And there is really, for heavy rain, the bad soils are not very good in infiltration, and you have forest roads because we heavily yield our forests with many roads, and then these roads are really highways for water, flushing out the water of the forest. So I think we can retain more water in the forest. And we have these problems of tree dying. So we start with that, and I think we can increase the water holding capacity of forests, just blocking the roads or diverting the water or not coming water towards the roads by these dead wood approaches and so on, and then we go on with the agriculture. Yeah, okay, the second question was DEM, yeah. We have a 1 meter DEM by airplane, LiDAR measurements, so whole Germany was flown over by LiDAR, and it's not freely available normally, you have to pay for it, but if you have a scientific university project, they give it to you for granted. With the 12.5 meter DEM from the satellite images, we will use it in Benin for the Fury Flood project, and we are very curious to see if this 12.5 meter resolution is sufficient for flood inundation modeling. I have some doubts, so we plan, if this is not working fine because the resolution is too coarse and the error are too high, we will bring our drone. We have a drone. Next time we will come to Benin, and they allowed us to fly the drone so that we can correct the DEM with the drone flights.
LiDAR.
No, it's not a LiDAR drone. This LiDAR is too expensive. It's a photogrammetry drone. So we need some fixed points and then to correct it. Yeah. So LiDAR would be better, but for the project we had a commercial company for LiDAR. But there's also a EU project, we had just applied for it with a Danish technical university, and that is using LiDAR drones for Africa and for other countries. But I don't know if this proposal will be approved, so the decision is in June. But if so we can also go to Benin with a LiDAR drone. The third was a parameterization, yeah. That is totally correct. It depends on the purpose. I know you can manipulate the water content in the root zone with the EPCO factor and the distribution of the roots in the SWOT model to a large extent. So I think Pablo needs also soil moisture measurements in the field. And the soil moisture measurements are much cheaper now. So we should invest soil moisture measurements to fix the model. And because he also wanted to get yields, I think, so we need EPIC model or SWOT model. Perhaps the EPIC model is better for the field because we are only on a field, but it has the same parameters, the EPIC model. So so yield measurements, how much dry mass you get from soil moisture measurements, and then we can multi-calibrate the model. And we will fix some other parameters which are not important. So I don't have a better answer for that, because if you want to go really to ecological models, it's not only the water balance, it's more. And the 4-parameter model is mainly about water balance, I think. Yeah. For the big catchment, we'll talk about it if we really will go for SWOT coupled with mod flow, because the groundwater is important. There's also from the USGS a model called OHM, One Water Hydrological Model, that is mod flow coupled with a more simpler model than SWOT. Yeah. I discussed it also with Pablo. Perhaps we will compare these two models.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So we have two more questions, one from the online audience and one from the physical. We can start with the online.
I've decided to come to the front. I have a few comments on sharing the articles or books on uncertainty and sensitivity analysis on hydrological modeling, and second on development and application of the hydrological models. You also have an interested student in Bardir University. Pablo had mentioned it, so I will link you up after the workshop. And another from Kenya. So I have a few expressions of interest in your research, which we shall discuss after the workshop. And lastly, it's a question on if someone having an interest in modeling, can you offer some guidance or training, especially with hydrogeosphere model? Yeah, that's all.
Thank you.
So I would advise coming to TUM. That's not a joke. It's so you can apply as a master's student for TUM. We have students all over the world, and especially for environmental modeling or for our field of study, hydrology and water resources management. More than 50% of our students are non-German students, are coming from abroad, and we have no student fees, so it's really possible to apply for a master study at TUM. We don't offer special modeling courses, not yet. I don't know if we will do it within the SEED project, but for the Fury Flood project, for instance, we will offer next month, but it's only for the Fury Flood members, a telemark course. So the students are very interested in the telemark, hydrodynamic modeling, and Karl Bruch, I have introduced him, will fly with us to Togo, and to Lomé in Togo. There will be the workshop about telemark modeling. And so far we didn't offer other courses in the moment, but why not in the future?
For that, there is one more.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the presentation. I have two questions. First of all, I believe your work is also to prevent inundation, let's say in city. Now, how do you deal with flash flood from rain? Like, not from river overflow, but the rain. Because I'm from Congo and it rains a lot, so we happen to experience those flash flood from the rain. Now, the second question is, have you thought of using those, the water flow for, let's say, hydroelectric system, maybe to power, to supply public lights and reduce the cost of electricity production?
Yeah, thank you very much. The first question, so pluvial floods in cities, there's a concept of the sponge city. Have you ever heard about sponge cities? You cannot drain the water out of the city with your draining system. Also, not in every country of the world. In Germany, we have the drainage system is designed for a 5 to 10 year rainfall. Everything about 5 to 10 years cannot drain by the concrete pipes, by the sewage pipes, you know. And also, in many countries they are blocked, perhaps more in developing countries, you have garbage in the pipes and they are blocked. So the solution, some amount of water is going through the pipes, through the underground, but most of the water in a heavy rainfall event, in a pluvial event, you have to divert to green areas. That is a sponge city concept. You have some small measures to divert the water into parks, to playgrounds, soccer fields, and so on, that it will not harm buildings or garages or hospitals and so on. And therefore you need this exact digital elevation model. So half a meter is decisive where the water flows, or even 10 centimeters. Also, you can use roads for conveying the water outside the city. If you just increase the pedestrian walk line with the roads, yeah. So the road can be also a little river in such case. Or you store the water in cisterns, but this is more excavation work. So this is a blue concept. It's favorable is more the green concept, that you need to use all green spaces in your city, diverting the water. You cannot flush the water out of the city. And that is modeling work. You estimate a precipitation, for instance, 100 millimeter in 1 hour. You model the flow paths and you manage the flow paths to divert it into areas where you have no damages or less damages. Yeah, that is a sponge. It's called sponge city concept because a city should work like a sponge. Yeah, and the second question was hydropower. Hydropower, yes. Hydropower is a big issue in Africa and in Asia. In Germany and in Europe, we have exhausted all our hydropower reserves. We have reservoirs, we have river runoff hydropower reservoirs in the mountains, especially Bavaria is a hilly region. And the philosophy is only to optimize the turbines, so install better turbines, but not to build more hydropower reservoirs. Also because of environmental effects. If you build a big reservoir, you block the river and all the ecology is disturbed. But it's in Bavaria, the share of electricity due to hydropower is about 30%. So it's a big share of hydropower because we have this hilly situation. But it's more for the past. So some people discuss blocking also small rivers for hydropower, but that would increase the share only to 1% or from 31 to 31%. And I think it's not worthwhile to build runoff river hydropower also for the small rivers. The ecological hydropower runoff river hydropower stations, but it's still a blocking of the river. And for the ecology, for fish migration and so on, I would not recommend it for such a little increase in hydropower generation. We are more going for wind and for solar power, a geothermal power as well, and offshore wind power and the coastlines. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. And we're going to the last question from our YouTube listeners. Yes. It reads maybe another comment. Hello, Prof. This is from Beatrice. Hello, Prof. Can you please explain a bit how are you going to use the Bayesian approach to estimate marginal parameters?
Oh, right. I cannot answer this in the moment. It depends on the case, and yeah, it's impossible. We have to. You mean the procedure, how to make it, or how is it? So for the procedure, there's much literature. So normally we start for the prior distribution, a uniform distribution. If you don't know something about the parameters, we start with a uniform distribution. Then we check the results, and then we can confine the uniform distribution to a smaller distribution, perhaps in one sentence.
Thank you so much for that response. I think if in case there is more questions or inquiries, you can just send an email to jkuat@jkuat.ac.ke, jkuat@jkuat.ac.ke, and you'll have your responses as soon as possible. We are coming to the end of this, and before I welcome the principal to give closing remarks and to officially close the session, I have been your moderator, Coach Dennis, and it has been a pleasure moderating. Welcome, Principal.
So thank you so much, Coach, for the wonderful moderation that you've done. And participants, we are happy. I believe we are happy that we had a very nice workshop facilitated by Professor Bells. And Professor, I think there's been a lot of knowledge sharing from you. I believe a lot of people have enjoyed the sensitization, the analysis techniques that you have shared, and of course also allowing Pablo to be with us, one of your students, and of course telling us what your other students are doing. We are very excited. We really appreciate you coming to JKUAT. We also wish to appreciate all the participants who have been with us, Professor Gatenya, our colleagues, the Dean of SOBI, and the chairman who attended with him. Definitely we had a lot of participation online. We also had Jacqueline, a PhD student who has been working with seed sometime at the beginning, at the initial stages of seed. but currently she is a PhD student working on biogas cleaning as part of the seed student. So we are so happy. I have seen a lot. I've learned a lot on hydrology and modeling. I thought that it's only in energy generation, combustion, thermodynamics where we do modeling, but I've seen there's a lot of modeling that goes on in hydrology, and I'm sure Dr. Howie will agree with me. When we are modeling what goes on inside the engine, the internal combustion engine, we didn't know that even flooding itself, or even aspects of flood mitigation and control would benefit from modeling. So we really appreciate you, Prof, for that. And of course, we have seen there's a lot of data available. And then the question is then, how are you analyzing? How are you managing this data? What information can you draw from this data? And I believe this all data that is available, like I've seen there's some data that you collected in the 300 AD on something about the events of up to 2017 for the whole of Germany, and then from 13 something up to 2017, quite a lot of information. So then all this information, I'm sure we are carrying out the research so that we can not only progress ourselves, but also influence policy development in our respective countries. And I'm also happy that we also have PAU students, PAU. So when you are with JKUAT, it's like you have access to the whole of Africa, because you have Pan-African University. You had a student asking a question, he is from Congo. And then the lady is from? Uganda. She's from Uganda. Professor Frank, I think, is traveling to Makerere University. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, she'll be here next week. He'll be here next week. We also have students. I think at Pan-African University, we normally take close to or more than 30 countries, students from 30 countries for postgraduate training. So yeah, we are happy to be a one-stop region, particularly for science, basic science and technology and innovation training. So again, we are also happy that there are some scholarships that are available, where Prof said you go to Munich, but possibly when you are carrying out research, you carry out research in Africa, or you collect data that particularly will benefit Africa. It will be very interesting. So I wish to thank all of us once again for our participation. I wish to thank once again Professor for setting aside time. It's a big honor to us as a university that you came and you selected us for this capacity building, and also letting us know what you are doing with your students, and also as a chair within your school. So again, thank you for your contribution, participants, even as you asked questions, as you try to understand, but particularly your presence is very important, and we feel honored as a seed project. I wish also to appreciate our communications department, corporate communication, and also the social media department. We thank you for covering the event, and the fact that the event is available on YouTube means that Prof can access it even several years down the line. Assume they will not, it will not be deleted, and probably they'll be tracking the number of views as the lectures are being listened, or they are being, people are following them online. So I wish to thank all of us for our participation. Once again, the Department of Social Media convey our gratitude to the chair for releasing you and setting up everything for us. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much, everyone. And I wish at this juncture to declare the workshop closed. Thank you so much. So, what is next? The conference ends, okay.
Okay, thank you very much for this kind invitation. It was a pleasure. First, it was a little bit too specific for hydrologists. I didn't know the audience before. How many were online? More than 30? Okay, that's great. Yeah, more on Zoom, yeah, online on Zoom. Okay. Do you... I can recharge, yeah. That was many topics, yeah.
Social media.